Hello, friends. Welcome back to Reiki Crossroads and Connections, where we are exploring practices and principles and lifestyles that help us to live lives that are grounded, that are spacious, that are connected, and that help us to remember ourselves. And we're doing that through conversations between a Reiki teacher and practitioners of a wide range of magical arts, of healing practices, of visual arts, of working with the land, the occasional engineer. Really, anything that helps us to land in our life in a way that is rooted, spacious, and connected. And those points, those moments in time that help us to remember ourselves. My name is Michaela. Thank you so much for being with us and welcome back. And today, one of the best things about offering this series is that I get to meet new folks and I get to connect with amazing people who are doing things that I have not got my hands on in the past, and of course, share them with you. So I'm just delighted to invite Cal Melkez to come into the studio today and join me for a conversation. Welcome, Cal.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Honored. Already, I can say I'm enjoying the energy, the presence that you bring to it, and that's something I see few people do with podcasts. Is they want it to be a conversation, which is good, but not an experience at the
Mm.
same time. And just starting out the way you did was just very reassuring, very relaxing. Just taking that moment to kind of tap in to get connected. I really like that.
Aw, thanks for that feedback, Cal. I appreciate it. Yeah, my last person who joined me for a conversation asked if we could just do some mindfulness practice in the podcast, and we did that, and it was delightful. So we like to really base these conversations on the experiences that we have, right? In our practice, of course, but also with each other and in the conversation. So I appreciate that feedback. So friends, as always, I want us to just land together in this conversation. First, by sharing a little bit about who Cal is, just the tiniest little bit that is on paper. And hopefully we'll be able to follow that thread into much more. But to begin with, I want to explore the fact that you, Cal, you're a renowned spiritual life coach and a Reiki master. We have that piece in common, whose expertise in astral projection and in magic has guided countless individuals on their path to spiritual awakening. And you have a background in psychology. You bring a unique perspective to understanding human consciousness, integrating scientific principles with ancient esoteric knowledge. I am super interested in that connection and look forward to exploring it. Over the past decade, you've dedicated yourself to teaching transformative practices of meditation, of astral projection, of hollotropic breathing, transcendental meditation, and ritual magic. You're also the head of the Astral Mind Podcast, where you delve into these and other topics, as well as teaching on YouTube, on TikTok, and of course, we will have all of those links to all the socials down below for those of you who want to keep up. And in addition to this online presence, your innovative system of astral cord tethering offers a revolutionary approach to connecting with the spiritual realm, providing readers with the tools to harness their innate magical abilities. I want to dive into all of that. Thank you so
We
much for
should.
being here. It's so juicy. Okay. So I want to dive right into asking you how you'd personally define magic, but I'm going to put a pin in that because we love to really always begin with just the simple question of how are you doing today, just to get ourselves centered in the space. So how are you?
It's an amazing question and a good place to start. I feel like, especially doing Reiki, just starting the day and, making that declaration today is going to be a day for peace. I'm going to be kind today, gentle, and all these things. Uh, Today is good. I feel very good today. It's been a good season. There's been the turmoil and the turning of the dirt and getting it ready, the tilling, so that this new season can come. But I feel like I'm in a place right now where the strange and the out there spiritual occurrences are becoming commonplace.
Mm.
Uh, and I've got lots of stories to regale you about those things. I find this spiritual journey to be increasingly exciting and ever present and in this moment right now. And that's one of the things that I love telling people is that it's here right now. What you're looking for, what you're trying to achieve, the hope, the love, the presence. It's here in this moment. So I'm doing very well, very well today.
Amazing. Yeah, I resonate with that a lot. And, especially that idea of magic and, the unseen and the unknown being available right now in this moment in the midst of our daily life. It's not something we have to check out from our life to access. It's something that we can learn to normalize in our day to day. And I've also kind of had really a month, but especially the last couple of weeks of really being aware of that. Lots of synchronicities happening around some really intense things. I've been to 3 funerals in the last month, and each one of them was exquisitely beautiful and so hard. Just that perfect alchemy of love and grief and all of the hard places, and at the same time these moments of synchronicity and these moments of relief and rest and connection and laughter. And I'm just so grateful that we have practices that allow us to be present enough in something hard that we don't miss those things, because synchronicities and magic and all of these moments are actually happening all the time, but we have to remember how to see them. So, yeah.
I agree, definitely. There's always this cosmic play happening, and I feel like we're, especially in our society today, it's fast-paced technology society. It takes away from this moment right here where everything happens. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. What's going on with you, and the funerals, the synchronicities, this supercharge that's happening right now. I really feel that there's definitely energy in that, and that's that inner alchemy you talked about. It's funny enough, I talk about this a lot. Inner alchemy. It's just knowing that you can take the negative and you can take the positive, and you can shift them and move them around. They're supposed to be taken as one. That's the whole experience. And there's so much power in that,
Yeah.
being able to take what happens in life and still see it as, this is an experience. I'm going to learn from it and grow from it. And there is beauty in it. I love that you said that. They were beautiful, exquisite. Even in these times where you're supposed to be going through this, terrible, this turmoil and this grief, there's still beauty to be found in that. And that's a hard place to be able to look at something that most people perceive as the worst possible thing, and be able to derive the community and the love out of even that. Now, you mentioned the esoteric, and I like to mix in ancient texts and apply scientific things to them. Uh, I do a lot of research on the Bible because that's where I started. My Christian walk was there, and I found a lot of similarity between looking at any moment and every moment and finding the peace and the joy and the love in that moment. And there are plenty of stories throughout the Bible and other faiths where a situation that was dire was turned around to be something that would be desired. It was a great outcome. So it's really powerful.
Yeah, and you began this conversation using the seasonal metaphors, right? Of having gone through the season of preparing the soil and being in that, and now, stepping into this quickening of summer and this opening of the potential that is present when we've done that sowing practice. And that's one of the things I've always appreciated so much about the Bible. So much of the teaching is coming through metaphors and direct observation of the natural world and the ways in which we're in relationship with it. So yeah, I love that. I cannot think of ever reading a bio on this series before that mentioned the word magic as many times as yours did. And I am intrigued by that. And I would love to know if you have a personal definition of magic, or how you understand that as a phenomenon or as a concept, or just what's your relationship to the idea of magic?
I added the word in there into the bio specifically because I knew it was a buzzword and I knew it would perk up people's ears and like, whoa, what's, all this. I think magic is what we do. It's this life experience that we're having right now, just bringing people's attention to the fact that you're experiencing something right now. Your bones in a bag of flesh, but somehow you're having a conscious experience. Like that in itself is magic,
Yeah.
apart from enlightenment and spontaneous awakenings. But magic for me is what you'd find in Hermeticism or these other occult sort of ideas. It's just the manipulation or the turning and moving of reality into things that you want them to be. This could be manifestation, this could be ritual magic, ceremonial. More of what I do happens in the astral realm. I started out my journey as an astral projector. That was the thing that opened me up to all of this and let me know that I was really tapping into something. And a lot of the work I do now is that. But magic is, it's all encompassing. And many people do it without even knowing that they're tapping into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that feels very, very resonant. And the idea that I mean, one of the things that just lights me up so much is people who are able to hold an absolute belief and reverence and delight in scientific inquiry and a belief in magic at the same time, right? However they define magic, it might be God, it might be, universe, however that is defined. But this holding together in the same space and the same mind and the same body, the idea that these are just different ways of inquiring about what we don't know yet about life, right? And what we can't see or what we do see, but it's curious to us. What we experience inside that we don't quite have a definition for yet, answering the question of why. That these are not incompatible things, right? I mean, there's points of incompatibility that come up in the complexity of sitting with it, but that, science and spirituality or science and magic aren't, they're just different ways of asking the question why. And so that also stood out to me, right? That you do identify with science and you do come to a certain degree from that background. And so with that, I would love to just invite you to share, in this moment, what pieces of your own personal history feel like they have heart and meaning to share. I think about it as our lives are this complex tapestry, like the beautiful one hanging behind you right now, that's made with so many threads, so many moments, every moment really that we've experienced, that weave together to create who and what we are in this moment. And so when you think about that journey of doing this work with astral projection and everything else that encompasses, what are the one or two threads in your life that you want to share about how you got here?
Initially, I had a rather difficult time bringing together and collaborating those two forces of science and magic or spirituality, because they're often, at heads. They're spite with each other. What I found over the years, and of course through a few experiences that I'll tell you about, is this common thread between them of the potential and power of the human mind. When I initially started, I was deep into meditation because as a child, I just had a knowing, which of course in science or in any matter of law is just, oh, you just know. It's like, yeah, well, yeah, you just know. Like I just knew that I had been here before and that I had another family, and I was very intimately connected with the idea of reincarnation as I was growing up. And that led me, of course, to meditation and, the Far Eastern practices of meditation and breath work and so on. Um, that eventually led me to astral projection. After years and years of trying to make it work and starting to get it, working for me, I've had several experiences, thousands at this point. I've been doing it for over a decade now. And some of the most powerful experiences are the ones that let me know that in this moment, like we are connected. And I know it's a cliche thing to say, but the power of it is profound. One experience I had that kind of sparked my interest more for scientific inquiry was I had been in a period of trying to experiment with projection. I'd leave the body, I'd have these experiences, but I wanted to see how long I could do it for, how long I could have this out of body experience. And through that experimentation, I was doing a specific meditation. And while out of body, things just began to splinter and almost like breaking glass, like a cracked glass would splinter. And there were 1,000 shards of this glass. And each shard had a different moment in my life. And I could see my past and I could see my future to where I was old. And it would even go on to other versions of me. And I was just enamored by this. I sat there for I don't know how long looking at these different shards of my life, different conversations and things I remembered specifically doing. And so they got me interested in this many worlds, the quantum physics of it. So I was like, I have to research this and look into
Mhm.
this. Going to school for such things, I'm, doing schooling for computer science now as well. And, I've done a lot of math and, oh goodness, the math.
The
Uh,
math of it all.
yes, the math of it all, but the interesting and strange correlation between quantum physics and consciousness and how at the end of the day, science can't disprove how powerful things like the placebo effect are. And in fact, they promote those things like, hey, the human mind can do this. And there are tests that were done where people were, an interesting test was done where you took two groups. One group was going to learn to play the piano, I believe it was, among other things. It was like sports and things like that. And the other group was going to actually play the sport, actually play the piano, where the first group was just imagining doing it and imagining that they were getting better. In this test, it found that the results after a month, you may have to, don't quote me on this, you have to find it and do it exactly. But once the test was concluded, the results were nearly the same in the group that hadn't touched the instrument, that hadn't done the exercise. They actually saw this neural change in their body, this neuroplasticity. They found results just believing that they could find it.
Yeah,
And that's the amazing thing. People cure themselves just believing it. And
yeah,
looking into things like that, the question becomes, are we affecting reality or is reality affecting us? Well, it's actually both. We've got this strange interplay. Exactly. We've got this strange interplay of us affecting reality and reality affecting us. It
mm,
works together in this interesting matrix.
yeah,
And it's things like that that led me down this path of, well, let me look through these ancient texts and these, going back to cuneiform and looking at the Sumerian texts about the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Enuma Elish and things like this that talk about creation. And the ancient texts throughout the Vedas and Hindu culture, they all tell the same story
right,
about our interconnectedness with God or with universe or whatever you want to call it, and how we can affect change in this reality.
yeah.
Those are the underpinnings of magic. Now that's where I get the ideas from.
So juicy. Um, yeah, there's a few things, a few threads there, and I do want to in a moment circle back and sometimes we just like get into it and then I'm like, hold on, let's define astral projection. So that's a
Oh
pin.
yes.
We're gonna circle back around to what in the world is that. Um, but the thing that I wanted to kind of land with now is this piece around placebo effect that you named, and the idea and the example there of the way in which what we're paying attention to, what we're focusing our attention on, has this impact, this ripple effect on reality, including the reality of our own system. And for the longest time, anytime I would hear someone talking about the placebo effect, that the purpose of it was to focus on the effectiveness of whatever was being tested. And then there was a placebo, the control group that didn't receive the thing that was being tested. And so that group supposedly would be neutral. And then you could test the effectiveness of the thing against the neutral group. And then these, reports of like, well, the neutral group has these varying results in it. And that was never the point of the conversation. It was the effectiveness of the thing. And eventually kind of being like, but what's happening over there in that neutral group where they're having effects? They're having, it's as if they've taken the medicine or done the thing or whatever. And so, diving into that as a phenomenon, right? Not a place of neutrality or a place of no impact, but as a phenomenon in of itself. And many of us, I'm sure we can think about places in our life where that has been true, where we have believed something or wanted something or focused our attention on something that wasn't yet in tangible existence, but we focused on it enough that some piece of it came to form. I think of a mentor of mine, Marilyn King, who was an Olympian, and she went to the Olympics twice. And then in advance of going to her third Olympic trials, she was in a car accident, hurt her back really badly, and just ended up not being able to train. But she kept thinking she was going to get better enough to train. And so in the meantime, she is watching video of all the record holders in her events. She was a pentathlete, so 5 events. Just watching them over and over, over and over. She's bedridden. She can't get up. She's in pain. She's watching, these record holders over and over, and she's imagining herself going through the motions and doing the thing over and over and over again. And when it became clear she was not going to be well enough to compete in the Olympics, she's like, screw it, give me a shot in my back. I'm going to the trials. I'm not going to miss the trials. And she went and placed third in those trials after having done zero physical training for months and months and months and months, right? That sent her on a whole life's journey about exceptional human performance, and the fact that, the percentage of that is our attention and what we're paying attention to in our focus, as opposed to strictly what we do with our body. So thank you for letting me step back with Marilyn for a minute. I haven't seen her in a while, and I feel like I need to reach out to her.
That was an incredibly powerful story. Oh goodness. Like getting goosebumps and chills just talking about that, because that's exactly what it is. And a big shock, I feel like, to a lot of people is that when I tell them the placebo effect is just a word that defines a phenomena. It's just a word. The phenomenon is still happening. And that phenomena that you're tapping into is magic. That's the same thing that's talked about in the Bible when Jesus says, oh, if you have little faith, if you just had faith, you could tell this mountain to move and it would be moved into the sea. And it's this crazy idea that Jesus presented where he would always say, oh, it's just your faith. Whenever people would be healed, he say, your faith has made you whole. And I always thought that was a very interesting nugget, is it was always the people who had faith in his ability to heal them. What they were doing was using him as an effective placebo, so that they could fix themselves.
Yeah, so that's that's the whole, we'll keep pulling that thread throughout that conversation, but I would love to have you circle back around and just like as a starting point, right? This term astral projection is another one of those like magic that kind of gets bandied about and means different things in different contexts. I think the first time I ever heard the term astral projection was in a B-52s song from the 80s. Did not know what it meant, but it sounded pretty groovy. And it's come up in a variety of contexts since then. So I'd love to just have you ground us in how you define that term and what that means to you for your work.
Of course. Well, as a astral projection coach and teacher of these like spiritual topics, I tend to do a lot of research on where these things initiate and where they have their start. And I'm sure for the people who have heard of astral projection, they most likely have heard of Robert Monroe. He wrote the book called Journeys Out of the Body. It's just, familiarizing people who weren't familiar with the concept of leaving the body and these journeys beyond the body. Another way that this can be explained is like near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences where people see themselves floating up away from their body after a near-death experience or a car accident or something like that. In short, I can basically say astral projection is the process of projecting your conscious awareness from this physical body somewhere else. This can be done through just your imagination. This can be done through...
It sounds like imagination.
Exactly. Yeah. This can be done through daydreaming. Everyone does this. It's a perfectly natural thing. And there's a spectrum. Whenever I teach people about astral projection, I say there's the spectrum where you're completely focused on the physical body, and then you're completely focused on the external astral body or wherever you happen to be. This can be remote viewing, this can be mental projection, whatever you want to call it. And it is very, very real. I don't want you to get the idea that, oh, I'm just imagining things. That's where it starts. And I don't want to downplay the power of imagination. But it does become a very vivid experience, just like this three-dimensional experience we're having right now. We're only aware of this physical reality because of our five senses. Our minds are being inundated, hit, attacked by a torrent of information, thousands of bits of information that are picked up subconsciously. The mind takes that information and it channels it into a coherent picture for us so that we can understand it based on our belief system, based on what we think should be there. Here's a clear and obvious test. When you hear jumbled up audio and just, you don't know what it is, the moment someone tells you what you should expect to hear, you will then hear it
Mhm.
when you listen back to it. There's this idea of suggesting what's going to happen in your reality that actually shifts it.
Mhm.
Astral projection is saying, I'm not going to focus on the five senses and what I'm seeing here. I'm going to move my conscious awareness somewhere else. I liken this to a radio frequency. This is the home frequency.
Mhm.
This right here is the base state. When you turn the dial, you get a little change, and then you click over to the astral realm or the etheric or the spiritual world, if you want to keep it simple. That shift is a shift in conscious awareness.
Mhm.
At any moment, you can be somewhere else just as easy as you can imagine you are. What's the difference between your imagination and a dream? Nothing. They feel and look the same. An imagination would become a dream the more relaxed and in trance you make yourself. And that's the process of going into astral projection, getting into a deep meditative state, relaxing the body and quieting the mind to cause you to have the ability to move your awareness because it's no longer bogged down by the physical body. Now, it can get very nuanced, but that's the bare bones, what you need to know to go forward. That's the launching pad. You're
Yeah.
moving your conscious awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. So many layers there to explore. And I love that it begins with things that we're all familiar with dreaming, with daydreaming, with imagining,
It
uh,
has to.
with focusing our attention somewhere besides what's physically in front of us in the moment. And it makes me, I'm so curious about, the connection between that and another phenomenon that I explore quite a bit because I teach Reiki practitioners to make their practices trauma informed. So I've studied a lot about the physiology of trauma, and I know from my personal experience that dissociation is a really powerful strategy for being with intolerable situations, and that can become, almost an addictive response to stress and to difficult, painful situations in a way that necessarily doesn't serve us. And again, kind of from my own experience, spending a lot of years in a intolerable situation that I didn't know how to get out of, I just wouldn't be in it, right? I just
Mhm.
wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And it feels like what you're describing, right? And so I'm curious about, but what you're also describing is a way of operationalizing that in a way that isn't disconnected from our experience, our here and now, the moment, what's happening, and perhaps what we're meant to do or what we're meant to be, as opposed to what I was experiencing, which was a numb out what's happening, go somewhere else so you don't have to deal with it kind of experience. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts about the
No.
relationship between kind of trauma-based dissociation and what you're talking about here.
Oh, definitely. Derealization, it's something that I personally dealt with as well. Dealt with extreme anxiety for several years and have gone through months of this dream-like sort of reality where I couldn't shake it. And, so I've dealt with that a lot as well. I would say what we're doing with astral projection happens after a period of shadow work or internal scrutiny where you're picking out your belief systems, you're picking out your hurts and your wounds and these different things that you kind of identify with, and you learn to live above those things. You never get rid of them, you just learn how to manage them. It's like, this is what happened to me, but this isn't my story. This doesn't have to be who I am. I can write that story myself. Astral projection as a utility is, for me, a means of liberating my mind from the confines of this cramped physical body belief system that we have here, that this is all there is. Astral projection was my first wake up call to, well, maybe there's a little more than just this. And I feel like people get that in different ways. People get that at church, people get that through, serendipity or synchronicities and things like that. These different experiences that they have where it's just like, whoa, this couldn't have happened any other way, or ghost or some other, paranormal phenomenon. It's just like, wow, this is something's going on here. There's a glitch in the matrix. That's what astral projection is. It's the glitch in the matrix that we can take advantage of.
Right. Yeah, so it sounds like it's taking natural phenomenon that we experience, from the dreams and the imagination to something more severe like dissociation, which are brilliant strategies, right? Like this, just the capacity that we have to experience something that's not happening physically, and like you said, kind of operationalize that and intentionalize that in a way that makes it feel like we have more space inside, that there's more room for all of these things that we're experiencing, as opposed to, when in that dissociative experience, it's more like a contraction, like I'm getting smaller and I can't deal with what's here, so I'm just going to be in here, and getting less capacity in that sense. But it sounds like it's the same phenomena, it's the same ability,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
it's employing it in a way. And I love that you say we work ourselves to that through addressing our beliefs, our hurts, you know,
Yeah.
doing what we need to do so that we can step into that capacity, and thinking about it through the lens of practicing Reiki from the perspective of its Japanese origins, the original form. We often talk about it making that being in that practice, it's like we're creating more space inside to hold more complexity, to hold things that feel contradictory, to hold all of the feelings that we have, like the grief and the love, in the same space, so that we are more fully ourselves and we're more fully connected. You started with interconnection, and we therefore don't feel as trapped in this one little tiny space that we have. Yeah.
Absolutely. I find that Usui definitely, when I started it, my mentor, he just on a whim decided to leave where he was and move closer to where I was, and we met each other through very cinematic events somehow. It's like, oh, our paths crossed and it just so happened to work. And he taught me energy. I'll say he taught me how to feel that and rest in that. And it wasn't so much of a now use this to help other people right away. It was sit in this and understand that you're tapping into something more than yourself. You are more than just this experience. And I would say that to anyone. My understanding of energy started with goosebumps, started with chills. And I always love bringing people back to what they can grasp,
Right.
like the imagination. That's where it starts, like with the chills and these flowing currents of like energy that you feel. That's where tapping into this energy starts, and then you learn to direct that and push that into others, and so on and so forth. But it starts with something simple like that. And
Right.
I found the most powerful way to develop that is through genuine gratitude and the vibration of love.
Hmm.
And I always tell people to look at the iconography of Jesus, where he's pointing at the heart center. It's like I feel like there's something very powerful about that. Studying the chakra system, the heart center is like the bridge between the lower three chakras and the upper three chakras. If you want to have more of these spiritual experiences, you have to connect with the heart, the God within, or the energy, you know, the energy, inner God, if you want to look at it like that. Uh, but there's a lot of power in that, just resting in that energy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that point of that repetition of form that we see across so many traditions of, really these kind of three centers that describe a full experience. A lower center that helps us feel grounded and safe and resourced and nourished, and stable, and then an upper center that allows us to feel spacious and that there's possibility, that there's something beyond us, and then this centered center, this heart center, where we can truly feel connected and we can be in that territory of compassionate courage. And so often we see the repetition, and as you say, that iconography of the hand on the heart, that we see so often within spiritual leadership. It's not an accident. It's a repeated human experience that's observed and then communicated
Yeah.
spontaneously within, all cultures. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because that definitely lines up with my belief system on all of the spiritual practices, spiritual leaders, and cultures throughout antiquity. Is been this common thread of of them encountering these beings or these angels or gods, what have you, and relating that to their human experience. I feel like that's all religion is the story of encountering the same thing, just talking about it in a different way. Um, and I feel like if you can kind of grasp that, then it frees you from the confinement of one religious structure. Then you say, well, I like that, what they talk about over there, and I like this and I like that. Well, let me use what's useful. Let me take on what I can take on. And for a long time, that's what I did. I jumped from all sorts of different practices and different cultures and what they did, and formed a new sort of spiritual practice for myself. I feel like spirituality has to be an individualistic thing
Mm.
at first. Like you have to be able to form your own sort of practice, your own ritual before you go into a congregation or a community. Know who you are first.
Right. Oh, it's so good. I mean, it's yeah, again, two threads that the piece around that individual experience and needing to have that and recognize that. And then the way that we filter those experiences through our beliefs, our cultural context, what we already know, what we can observe, what we've discovered as a people by that time. And that so much of the conflict between belief systems comes from those places, right? Those daily perceptions of life based on context. But when we can bring it back to, but what was the experience you had that sparked that question or that curiosity or led you to believe that or to tell the story in a particular way or to use the metaphor that you used or the practice that you used? But what was the experience that you had that you were trying to communicate to somebody else? Right? Because that's what religion is like we have an experience and then we want to communicate it with someone else. And that idea that, we do have to get clear with our own experience and who we are. And we understand ourselves as human in relationship to other humans. And so then, of course, we want to bring that out and be in communion and compare notes on the experience. And did you see that? Did you have that experience? What was it like for you? And that, like, if we, just the more we can come back to that question of what was the experience that led you to this, I think we would have less conflict between. I mean, that's how I had to circumvent my own prejudices around certain belief systems, right? Is like, but what is the shared experience here? Because there is one, and I'm just not seeing it because there's these blinders that I have.
Yeah, I dealt with that a bit. Going through, again, I was a Christian for a long time, really, really into it. I did that all day, every day. I'd be praying and worshiping. I'm just a very extreme person. I like to take things to the edge.
Yeah, why
And
not?
I reached a point where I hit the wall
Mm,
of those teachings and experiences. And there wasn't anyone within the confines of that teaching that was able to help me any further. And I was moving more into astral projection and meditation
mhm,
and then starting to explore more of who I was beyond this body. And traditional Christianity didn't provide that, so I found it in other places. And I've since found a new love and appreciation for the things Jesus taught because they sync up with a lot of other things that were taught all over the world. And I mean, I can go into the whole story of the Council of Nicaea and the canonization of Scripture and how it was all put together, and how there were key teachings and ideas left out of the traditional Bible that draw those threads and those lines to other cultures. Where it's like, well, why was this left out? I believe it was a political agenda. I believe it was controlling masses. Uh, but we can sidestep all of that by just saying, hey, like you said, what was the experience? You encountered something. What was it? How did you go about doing it? Because I want to encounter that as well.
right.
That's all it is. Like, I want to experience this also.
Yeah,
Uh, that's the main point.
yeah. I appreciate the frankness about the what to me has always seemed like the inevitable imprint of political and cultural time and place when something gets codified in the way that a religious text gets codified. Of course, it's being impacted by whatever is happening in the social dynamics of the time, and we don't always hear that acknowledgement, right? And it's interesting to me to be able to hold that reality and still not feel like the wisdom inside of the text is threatened by the fact that the way in which the text was produced might have had some influence by the time and place in which it was written down. To me, it's like, of course it did, but does that nullify the experiences that led to the codification in the first place? It doesn't. It just means that there's some messy thread untangling that needs to happen. And we have to come back to, but what is my experience with that? And does it resonate? And maybe there's something else that also resonates that can help shed light on this. I think about the writings of Kukai, who was the founder of Shingon Buddhism, the first specifically Japanese branch of Buddhism. And, in the kind of memoirs that collect his written works, he talks regularly about the political influences and the pressures that he was under, going back and forth from Japan and China and having mandates from the emperors and from the magistrates that he was sponsored by, to do things in a certain way, and then where he chose to do his own thing anyway, because that's how he was led. But just like the honesty of that was very refreshing. That like, yeah, I was sent to do a particular thing, right? And then I discovered other things and they became more important. So yeah, I appreciate the frankness of that position.
Yeah, there's the definite egoic struggle that I feel like plagues the religious institution, regardless of where it is. Like you said, there is a political agenda, there is control that can be sought, and breaking free of that. And I believe that's the reason why the different religions are at war with each other. So many of them is because there is an egoic struggle. Like, I am right, and this is the way it should be. And that's textbook of, competition. That's how this 3D world works. So of course you'd see the byproduct of that in religion also. But rising above that and being able to take your little, nuggets of truth and be happy with them, even in the midst of things that were, you know, put together and flawed, and things were omitted. Like, say, the Bible, for instance, I personally believe, and there is historic proof that it was. Lots of the teachings were left out. Look at the Nag Hammadi library and the Dead Sea Scrolls, these things found later on that tell different stories. They reveal information that was left out, and they're older sources than the canonization that happened in the year 325. So, you find these things and it's like, well, I can find truth in this text. And that truth has to be enough for me until I become aware of something new.
Well, and modern practitioners in any time are going to also choose and censor what they teach from, even what has been canonized. I remember meeting a woman who'd, grown up in a very particularly rigid Christian culture and had never had her pastor preach the Sermon on the Mount, had never heard it before, didn't know it existed. Like, because that, church community, for whatever reason, said, we're not going to talk about that part where Jesus says those things about our relationship to the poor. I'm just going to not talk about that, and I was like, well, that's a choice.
Step right over that. That
Mind
was the
that
core
part.
message.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So,
Goodness.
I'd love to, we can definitely, jump on these flying carpets and follow them, probably for hours. And I want to, kind of come back to the question of how can this serve people in their life? And so I know that you work with people in a variety of ways, and you work with yourself, using these techniques in ways that I imagine are for a particular outcome, a particular way of moving through something. And so I'd love to have you just share a bit of how you work with folks, maybe some examples of what that might look like. And if you want to draw from any of your own personal experiences with astral projection, anything particularly powerful you've experienced, to just kind of give us some sense of like, how might this methodology serve us in our day to
Mm.
day?
Well, I want to start off by saying that the level of freedom that it gives is profound, especially for people like myself who felt particularly trapped by circumstances around them. Just being able to, like you said, just take that time. Let me just step away from this moment and, be in a place that I prefer to be, or experience something more than just this, because I know there's more than this. But as far as and just because you mentioned funerals earlier, it's like stuck in my mind this experience I had of my grandfather where when he passed, I was actively astral projecting, and there was a period where I would meet with him,
Mm,
and I would just have these, there was so many good moments where he would be teaching me something, but more where I was just sitting with him and we were enjoying this scene or wherever we were. So much of just sitting in that present moment. I feel like a lot of people are limited mentally when it comes to their belief system, not just with magic and things of extraordinary means, but their ability to function in life. They're immediately defeated.
mm,
So much of what I do, interestingly enough, is the rewiring and
mm,
resetting of mental beliefs.
yeah.
And like, who are you actually? A
Mm,
lot of what I do is shadow work and helping people through these sort of issues. Before we get to the advanced spiritual things, it's freeing yourself from the limiting belief system, from the script that you were given as a child, that you are just a normal person, and hey, this is the way it is, and you can't have that or this. I like to help people achieve their highest goal and their highest means, and you do that as a practitioner. You do that by supporting their passion and ambition. I heard it stated. I
mm,
can't remember where. I heard it stated. It's such a good quote. But just follow your passion wherever it leads. We go through life like Tarzan, swinging through the jungle. It's not a straight line. It's usually bouncing back and forth from here and there, teaching people and having them accept the idea that, hey, it's okay to follow your excitement. If you want to learn this particular practice, learn it. If you want to go down this road in your life and pursue this new career or something like that, you should be open to allowing those things to happen. Like, open to where life takes you. It reminds me of what's the movie with Tom Hanks, and uh I can't remember it right now. It's where he's like, he is a run Forrest. Why can't I remember the
Forrest
Forrest?
Gump. Right,
I remember the quote, but now it's wrong.
right.
Um, where he describes, his mom talks about destiny, and it's, you're a feather, but you're being blown by the wind, and the wind is destiny, but you have to be blown by the wind. You have to be a feather, and you'll end up where you want to be. And I feel like that's, in a nutshell, that's what astral projection does. That's what I do specifically. Astral cord tethering is I'll go into the astral, and I'll connect people with their desires, with the spirits they want to connect with directly. And I feel like opening the door for people to experience those things, which people come back and they tell me, it's like, oh my God, I had these amazing experiences with these entities, and so on and so forth. It starts with what we can grasp. And when you stick with it and you're dedicated to it, you experience so much more than that.
Yeah, I feel like people want to get some of that in their life. Like, yeah. I love, I again appreciate the way that you start with the 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 common experiences of this phenomenon that we can all relate to, like dreams and like imagination. And as you were talking and just sharing that tender story about your grandfather, I realized, just had a realization that I would say that the one time that I was pretty sure that something like astral projection had happened, where it's like not just a dream, but there's something that's both in the unseen and the imaginal, but also that's maybe back to that idea of influencing reality and reality influencing us, was also around the death of a grandparent when my grandmother Lucy passed. I had this dream when she was, I knew she was ill at that point. Had a dream that my family was at my grandparents' house, and I was called to go look out the window, and their whole courtyard was like an inland ocean, and there was this metallic silver humpbacked whale swimming in circles in this courtyard. And I knew it was Lucy, and as I was watching, the whale like swam up out of the water and into the air. And I woke up just all emotionally impacted and all of the things, and my aunt called and said she'd just gone into a coma, and she
Mm,
days later. But there was this feeling of, like you were describing, the connection with the person in a way that felt real and familiar, like we're sitting on her couch like we always would, but in this completely imaginal space where she's like this metallic whale, and then just like the tangible feedback that like in that moment when I was having that dream, she was leaving her physical
Mhm.
body. So yeah, I just got to have that memory again. So thank you for sharing
No, and there's no coincidence behind it at all. It comes together so nicely. I love that.
Yeah,
How things get stitched together like that.
yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. So how can people find you? How can they work with you? How can they get some of this in their experience?
Well, first, I'd like to tell people, sit with yourself for a moment, determine what it is you want, and from there you'll start to attract what you want. If I'm the right person to work with you, spend some time on my YouTube channel. I've got a website, astralmindfoundation.com,
Mhm.
where I post articles and videos all the time, just information that you can get and just, digest it as at your leisure. Uh, I would say get involved in information. And if you decide I would like to work with this person, then I've got on my website, I've got a book that you can look into for more information. Connecting the Current talks more about Reiki and that energy and tapping into the God within and things like that. That's what it's all about at the end of the day is me connecting people. I want to help connect people to that source so that they become a current for other people. But yeah, you can find me YouTube, TikTok, under Cal Melkez. If you just type in my name, you'll hopefully Google will do the thing and connect you.
Well, and we'll help out by putting all of those links down below so that people can easily find you. And there's just wealth of different ways of connecting. I love that you're providing so many different ways to really follow their own thread, as you say. If it feels right, let the wind blow your feather. Perhaps it'll land in just the right spot. Since you blessed us with some lovely cinematic quotes, the one that's been on my mind as you've been talking is a moment from the end of the Harry Potter series, a moment that takes place in an astral projection context between two
Is that
characters.
Dumbledore and Harry?
It's Dumbledore and Harry and King's
Love
Crossroads.
that one.
And, that last comment where Harry says, is this all real or is it just happening in my head? And he says, of course it's happening in your head, but that doesn't mean it's not real. And
Great one.
yeah, right? It's like
Great.
they're both true. They're both true.
Yeah.
Is what happens in here, as you say, is in that reciprocal relationship with what happening all around
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
So I love the way that you've helped us to see that in some very relatable examples and also open the door to some probably much deeper, much more mysterious examples that we could pursue if it was being asked for. So thank you very much. And I love to just end by asking, what is it that is bringing you joy, either in this particular moment in life in general? I'd love to just end on something that is bringing you joy in your life.
I I have a garden. This is really funny to me because people are surprised when I say it. I have a garden. It brings me a lot of joy. Uh, I found that meditation doesn't have to be a rigid and ritualistic thing where you just sit and cross your legs and be quiet for, however long. I tend to like to walk, but more since I've been focusing on this garden, I tend to just like to sit outside, watch the wind blow through the grass outside, and there are lots of butterflies and there are birds over at the garden. So it's just watching, just being present for that is it's very, very powerful.
I, yeah, I mean, I'm a lifelong gardener. It's a cornerstone of my spiritual practice as well as my lifestyle. So that makes absolute sense to me. I do my best meditating in relationship with the garden, not in stillness, but in focused relationship. And yeah, I will join you in declaring the joy that brings. I was over there yesterday. I have gardens in my home and then a little community garden plot down the block. And I went over to the plot after It's been like 100-degree weather here day after day, so I've been avoiding it. I had to go over there, water, and like the sunflowers are 12 feet tall, like the beans have grown in. It's this whole like cloistered space of green and cool and life. And I was just like, thank you, past self, for putting in the work that this space gets to be available. So I completely understand that sentiment. Yeah. Cal, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. I have so enjoyed it. You've helped me to think about things that are familiar to me in new ways, and you've introduced things that are unfamiliar that I want to continue following, the threads that you've laid down. And I hope that there's been something in this conversation that has been for you as well. Yeah. And friends watching at home, I am certain that something in this conversation has been for you. And as you move into your day, may that thread deeply nourish you for whatever this day is bringing you and all of your days. Thanks so much for joining us. We love you. Goodbye.